You talked about this at Kabetes. That was his Twitter handle. The late Jacob Juma at 12:34 p.m. on the 10th of December 2015 tweeted, and I quote, "The person who is obsessed with plans to kill me is William Ruto. I know that my assassination was discussed on Tuesday." My question to you is, did you have anything to do with that, as the late Jacob Juma claimed, as Jirongo claimed, and why you?
Well, I think we lost Jacob Juma, that he would be best placed to respond to your question. And maybe you should look for some time, get Jirongo here, so that he can tell the country what he means. But I'm sure as the sun is going to rise tomorrow, that the killers of Jacob Juma will be brought to book.
Maandishi haya si mageni jijini, labda kwa mgeni jijini, ila kwa wenyeji wa jiji ni maandishi tuliyoyazoea.
I am hoping that they will be brought to book and they will be known. I want to tell you and to tell Kenyans and to tell the country that I have nothing to do with anything to do with the life or death of Jacob Juma.
Investigations are going on. Have the police questioned you since Jacob Juma directly?
When the police want a statement from me, I will give it freely. Any day, anytime, anywhere.
But they haven't questioned you yet?
They have not asked me for a statement. I will gladly give my statement.
Okay.
Yeah. I will gladly do that because I'm a law-abiding citizen and I want to help in getting to the bottom of this death of Juma, or indeed any other Kenyan.
In part 1 of the Jacob Juma story, we dropped off at Juma's turning point, when court battles with the Uhuru government over huge business deals gone south turned him into a government critic, an anti-corruption crusader, and a whistleblower. In this episode, part 2, we take a look into Juma's online activism and his assassination that remains a mystery to date. Welcome to Silent Shadows. As always, if you appreciate our true crime storytelling, support our work by liking and subscribing. Together we uncover compelling tales of crimes and mysteries in Kenya and beyond, presenting well-balanced narratives that respect the victims and their loved ones. In hindsight, Jacob Juma was ahead of his time because he used his social media accounts, especially on Twitter, now X, to call out and expose the corrupt dealings of the Kenyan government at the time. As expected, he did take to social media to accuse Uhuru, Ruto, and Balala of cancelling his mining license at Mrima Hill and Forest Reserve in Kwale County. As Juma fought the government both online and in court, the government began to fight him. Slowly but surely, overtly and covertly, they also started threatening Juma's life. For example, on Wednesday, 29th July 2015, the former Inspector General of Police, Joseph Boynet, announced that no one in Kenya could own an armored car without a license. This seemed targeted at Juma, who was one of the few Kenyans who owned an armored car. Following this, Juma took to Twitter the same day to say, "This is how low this government has sunk. Now William Ruto is sponsoring laws to get us my armored limousine. Very cheap." Things would continue to go south, and Jacob Juma had a sense his end was near, and he often shared this on his Twitter account. Case in point is, on Thursday, 10th December 2015, when Jacob Juma posted on Twitter saying that William Ruto was after his life. His tweet read, "The person who's obsessed with plans to kill me is William Ruto. I'm aware of it. I know that my assassination was discussed on Tuesday." A week later, Juma tweeted again regarding the government's plan to kill him by saying, "Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, I'm not a coward. I have reached the pinnacle of my life, and I'm not scared of death. I will not run away from Kenya, my country." Apart from criticizing the government for cancelling his mining license, calling out key politicians such as William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta for wanting to kill him, Juma also exposed the involvement of key government officials in major corruption scandals, including the NYS scandal, the Eurobond scandal, the grabbing of the Langata primary school land by William Samoei Ruto, and most notably, Ruto's alleged grabbing of land belonging to the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, KCAA, to build the Weston Hotel. Juma shared key evidence on his Twitter account showing the ownership of the hotel did indeed belong to the Ruto's family, with the directors listed as royal aka Rachel Ruto, William Ruto, and Charlene Ruto. In March of 2015, Juma even filed a petition in court, wanting the title deed of the Weston Hotel revoked, the hotel demolished, and the land returned to its rightful owner, the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. Jacob Juma continued to rattle Uhuru government's feathers online. His tweets were often countered by their propaganda machine led by Dennis Itumbi. Yes, the same Itumbi who is currently overseeing William Ruto's propaganda machine, which churns out false information and even goes to the extent of paying bloggers to counter those challenging the government online. This just goes to show that Ruto and his minions have relied on the same tactics for years to subdue Kenyans speaking up against them. In addition to the land-grabbing saga by Ruto's family, Juma was also very vocal about government officials involved in the National Youth Service (NYS) scandal. These government officials that Juma was calling out for their involvement in the NYS scandal were, wait for it, Kipchumba Murkomen and Farouk Kibet, Ruto's PA. Juma claimed the two were at the heart of planning and executing the scheme, where approximately close to 800 million Kenyan shillings, approximately $7.65 million, was stolen from the NYS. One thing about Jacob Juma is he always shared evidence to back his claims, and part of the evidence Juma shared on Twitter, showing how the two were involved in the scheme, was a document showing Murkomen and Farouk Kibet had exchanged numerous calls with 31-year-old Ben Githi, a businessman who was the mastermind of the scam and was the conduit of the funds from NYS to the pockets of corrupt government officials, including Murkomen and Farouk Kibet. Unlike Guru, who was the devolution and planning cabinet secretary at the time, under whose docket the NYS is placed, would later tell the Public Accounts Committee when she was being grilled about the scandal that these phone calls between Ben and both Murkomen and Farouk happened before and during the transaction of the stolen NYS funds. Juma also revealed with evidence how Farouk Kibet had used some of the stolen money to buy 2 flats at Milimani Executive Apartments and paid 3.5 million Kenyan shillings in cash for one of the apartments. Juma also highlighted how Farouk Kibet was conveniently missing from the list of masterminds of the NYS scandal the Director of Office of Public Prosecutions was after for laundering the 800 million Kenyan shillings stolen from the National Youth Service. Jacob Juma also showed how Farouk Kibet, as Ruto's PA, did his dirty work, including tampering with ICC witnesses. And by saying tampering is putting it lightly because 13 ICC witnesses set to testify against Ruto were murdered. Given how close Farouk Kibet is to William Ruto, and he knows where all the dead bodies are buried, Jacob Juma insinuated that Farouk Kibet is untouchable. Juma did not stop there with his exposés. He also revealed how Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto stole the 2014 Eurobond money. To give you some context about the Eurobond, when the Uhuru Ruto government won the 2013 general elections, just under a year into their tenure, in June of 2014, they issued Kenya's first ever Eurobond worth about 200 billion Kenyan shillings, approximately $2 billion at the time. The money was intended to fund various infrastructure projects expected to spur economic growth. However, as is often the case with such huge sums of money, our politicians said one thing and did another, using the funds to enrich themselves. When this happened, Jacob Juma was among the first whistleblowers to bring to the public's attention how the money was stolen by those in power. According to Juma, the theft involved the Cabinet Secretary of Finance at the time, Mr. Henry Rotich, and his principal secretary, Mr. Duge, who instructed the transfer of the funds to the Commercial Bank of Africa (CBA), owned by Uhuru Kenyatta's family. Juma also alleged that about 200 to 300 million of the Eurobond money was used to refund campaign debts Uhuru and Ruto owed to various individuals and institutions that bankrolled their 2013 election campaigns. Part of this money, specifically $20 million, was paid to a Middle Eastern leader. This was according to Jacob Juma. Juma further alleged that some of the money was also transferred directly to the office of the president, from where it was channeled to private pockets, under the guise of fulfilling the duties of Kenya's highest office. Since some top lawyers were heavily involved in moving this money, Juma had promised to publish a complete list of their names. Tragically, he never lived long enough to expose them. By March of 2016, following all the exposés he had done, Jacob Juma felt like the government's annihilation machine was closing in on him, and he actively began looking to relocate from the country. He engaged several real estate companies to help him find a house outside Kenya. Some of the cities he considered buying a house in included New York, London, LA, and Cape Town. The property agents he had contracted to scout for suitable homes abroad shared that Juma was in a hurry to relocate, and he even authorized them to do all they could to convince the owners of properties he was interested in to sell. Sadly, Jacob Juma would not get the chance to flee the country, as his life was taken by hired assassins on Thursday, 5th May 2016, near Lenana School, along Ngong Road, just 2 months after he had begun considering relocating. In the morning of the said day, Juma left his current home and headed to Nairobi CBD for work. He spent about 1.5 hours at his office, during which he organized a press conference for the following day to update the public on the mining license dispute, since back in Washington, D.C., his company, Kotek Mining and Pacific Wildcat Resources, had filed new evidence in the arbitration case against the Kenyan government at the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, ICSID. Around noon the same day, Raila Odinga later alleged that Juma called him, appearing worried and requesting to meet. Unfortunately, Raila was unable to meet him due to other commitments. After the call, Juma had lunch with friends at the New Stanley Hotel. Following lunch, he went to his other office near the Hungarian embassy in Lavington, where he spent most of the afternoon. During this time, he also met with his lawyer before heading to Rose's apartments along Brookside Drive, also in Lavington. The guards at Rose's apartments confirmed using the sign-in book at the gate that Juma arrived at the complex at 3:15 p.m. They also noted that Juma often used the apartment as both an office for meetings with prominent individuals and a residential space. Tragically, 6 hours and 15 minutes after his arrival at Rose's apartments, Juma was found brutally murdered near Lenana School along Ngong Road, leaving behind more questions than answers about the events leading to his death. So what happened to Jacob Juma between the time he checked into his apartment at Brookside Drive at 3:15 p.m. and 6 hours and 15 minutes later when he was found murdered? To answer these questions, we will share 2 accounts of events. One by the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, DCI, and the other by journalist Dennis Onsarigo, who pieced together Jacob Juma's final hours in his investigative piece that aired on KTN on 23 May 2016. According to the DCI, at 7:34 p.m., Juma's car, which had left his flat at Rose's apartments on Brookside Drive, was captured by CCTV cameras along Waiyaki Way at the Westlands bus terminus, heading toward Nairobi city center. Juma was in the driver's seat with a passenger beside him. 2 minutes later, at 7:36 p.m., the car was seen passing near Villa Rosa Kempinski Hotel, still heading toward the Nairobi city center. A simple look at Google Maps shows that the drive from the Westlands bus terminus to Villa Rosa Kempinski Hotel takes about 7 minutes under ideal conditions. Considering it was a rainy evening and during rush hour, it would have taken Juma even longer. The police did not explain how Jacob Juma managed to cover a 7 minutes drive in just 2 minutes. At 7:38 p.m., the DCI further alleged that Juma's car was seen on Uhuru Highway past Utalii House near the Ministry of Tourism, heading toward Mombasa Road. Again, under ideal conditions, the drive from Villa Rosa Kempinski Hotel to Italy House takes about 3 minutes. Again, considering the traffic and the rain that evening, it would have taken Juma even longer. The police did not provide an explanation for how Juma covered this distance in just 2 minutes. After Juma got to the Utalii house, this is where the DCI's accounts of events becomes even more questionable. They claimed to have lost sight of Juma's car at Utalii house for 15 minutes, despite the road being monitored by multiple CCTV cameras. At 7:53 p.m., the DCI reported that Juma's car reappeared on CCTV cameras, having made a U-turn and now heading back along Uhuru Highway near Central Park. However, the DCI were unable to confirm who was inside the vehicle, if indeed it was Jacob Juma. At 7:55 p.m., the car was seen making another turn on Uhuru Highway towards Nyerere Road, near the Children's Traffic Park. For the next 19 minutes, the car was not spotted by any cameras along that road. At 8:14 p.m., Juma's car was now captured by CCTV cameras driving along Owings Kodhek Road near Yaya Center, heading towards Oleodume Road. At 8:27 p.m., the car was seen on Lenana Road, marking the last recorded sighting of the vehicle that night, before Jacob Juma was found murdered an hour later. The DCI also claimed that at around 9 p.m., 2 men approached a police officer guarding a construction site about 1 kilometer from where Juma was killed. The 2 men reported seeing a suspicious car with shattered windows at the Southern Bypass interchange near Lenana School along Ngong Road. Consequently, the DCI alleged that police officers from Karen Police Station responded to the scene around 9:30 p.m. and found Jacob Juma's car. According to the said police officers, the back window of Juma's car was shattered and Juma's bullet-riddled body was inside, along with multiple bullets scattered around the vehicle. On the other hand, the timeline put together by journalist Dennis Onsarigo in his investigative piece on Jacob Juma's last hours is way more believable. According to Dennis, 2 hours after Jacob Juma arrived at his flat in Rose's apartments at 3:15 p.m., he made a call at 5:11 p.m. to his cab driver, asking him to pick up a lady named Cheryl at Sarit Center and bring her to his apartment. According to Cheryl, this was the first time she was meeting Juma. How Cheryl and Juma had become acquainted or the nature of their business remains unknown and hugely speculated. At around 6:27 p.m., the cab driver dropped off Cheryl outside Juma's apartment. Juma and Cheryl spent just over an hour and 15 minutes together before they left the apartment complex. According to the records kept by the guards, Juma and Cheryl left the apartments in Juma's Mercedes at 7:45 p.m. This contradicts the DCI's timeline, which claims Juma was seen along Waiyaki Way near the Westlands bus terminus at 7:34 p.m. This discrepancy shows that the DCI's timeline was doctored and it's far from the truth. After Juma and Cheryl left the apartment at 7:45 p.m., the only person who lived beyond that day to give a timeline of where they went after leaving Brookside Drive was Cheryl, and her timeline of events is inaccurate. Cheryl claimed that Juma dropped her off at Trattoria restaurant in the Nairobi city center at 7:50 p.m., 5 minutes after they left Juma's apartment. Here's the thing, getting to Trattoria restaurant from Juma's apartment in 5 minutes was impossible. Again, checking on Google Maps shows that traveling from Juma's apartment to Trattoria typically takes about 10 minutes. Again, Nairobi traffic gets crazy during rush hour, and to add to the fact that it was raining that evening, it would have definitely taken Juma more than 15 minutes to get from his apartment to Trattoria restaurant. Well, here's something else that's puzzling. There were 7 cameras near the area where the Trattoria restaurant is that the police could have used to verify Cheryl's story, and establish a more accurate timeline of when Juma dropped her off. However, the police failed to review the footage. Cheryl, who lived in South B, further claimed after Juma dropped her off at Trattoria, she took a matatu and headed home, and she was at home by 8:12 p.m. 8 minutes after dropping Cheryl off at Trattoria restaurant, Jacob Juma called his friend at 8:20 p.m. to let him know that he had just spoken to a foreign envoy and was about to send him documents detailing corrupt dealings of key government officials related to one of the cases he was working on. The specifics of the case are not mentioned, but it must have been either the Eurobond or the NYS case, as these were the two cases Jacob Juma was heavily involved in and was exposing on his social media channels. Since the police were unable to trace both Cheryl and Juma's movements in Nairobi CBD, the details of what happened between when Jacob Juma made this call at 8:20 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. when he was found murdered near Lenana School along Ngong Road remains a mystery. This was clearly by design, part of a well-planned murder intended to leave no witnesses or video evidence. Jacob Juma's movements from the CBD to the area near Lenana School, where he was found murdered, is just one of the many puzzling questions in this case. Another puzzling detail is who reported to the police that Juma's car was abandoned by the road. Remember, the DCI reported that two men saw Juma's car on the road with shattered windows and they drove 1 kilometer along the southern bypass, where they reportedly saw a policeman mumming a construction site and reported the suspicious car they had seen. This report by the DCI, however, is false. This is because the security guards at the construction sites near where Juma was shot told reporters they didn't have any police officers guarding the sites that night. So who called the police? Well, it turns out it was a police officer who called the current police station around 9:30 p.m. to report seeing a car riddled with bullets on the side of the road. The name of this officer and how they came across Juma's car remains unknown. After the unnamed police officer made the call, the police from the current police station arrived at the crime scene just minutes after receiving the call. Upon arrival, witnesses reported that the police immediately assumed Jacob Juma's car had been ambushed by his attackers and shot at while he was driving. One of these witnesses was Joshua, a towing company driver called to tow Juma's car by the police from the current police station. Joshua told Dennis Onsarigo that when he arrived at the crime scene, a few minutes past 10 p.m. on the night Juma was killed, the police had already secured the area. Joshua further asserted that the police instructed him and other civilians to stand far away from the car as they searched it. Joshua noted that it seemed as though the police were looking for something important in Juma's car, and they indeed were, since Joshua saw them take some documents from the car. When Joshua was finally allowed near Juma's car, he noticed something interesting. That is, despite the numerous bullet holes on the outside and the fact that Jacob Juma had been shot, there was also very neatly blood on the driver's seat. Joshua also observed that while there was blood on the passenger seat, the blood was not splattered, which would have been consistent with a shooting. Instead, the blood seemed to have been smeared on the seat. As someone who had been to many crime scenes to tow away cars, to Joshua, this particular crime scene looked staged. Dennis Onsarigo shared the same sentiments, and family believed that the scene along Ngong Road where Juma's car was found was staged, and that Jacob Juma was not killed inside his car by being shot at while he was driving. Instead, Dennis Onsarigo argued that Juma's dead body was placed inside the car by his killers, and the car was rolled to the side of the road to make it appear as though it had veered off the road after Juma was shot at. Dennis's argument, which is also our belief, is based on several pieces of evidence. Firstly, Juma's bullet wounds. Jacob Juma was shot several times, and the bullets to his chest, neck, and right hand indicated he was shot from a very close range. Additionally, the bullet wounds in his right hand suggested he was shot as he raised his hands to defend himself, and this was unlikely to happen when his car was moving along the highway at a speed of approximately 60 kilometers per hour with his windows rolled up. Secondly, there were no bullet cartridges at the scene where the police alleged the shooting happened, not even a single one. Given the bullets sprayed on the car and on Juma, it would have been a difficult and a time-consuming task to collect the bullet cartridges one by one, not to mention it was at night. Thirdly, Juma's body position. Juma was not slumped over the steering wheel, as would be expected if he had been shot at while driving. Instead, he was lying to his left on the passenger seat, which suggested his body had been placed in the car after he was already dead. Furthermore, as previously mentioned, the blood splatter pattern was not consistent with a man who had been shot severally on both sides of his neck, chest, and right hand, hitting his main arteries, since there was minimal blood on the steering wheel, the driver's seat, and the blood on the passenger seat appeared to have been smeared. Another piece of evidence put forward by Dennis was the fact that one would expect to hear multiple gunshots, given numerous bullets sprayed at Juma's car and gunshot wounds Juma sustained. However, construction workers at nearby sites reported not hearing any gunshots. Instead, they described hearing 3 loud noises, which they said resembled the sound of a car hitting bumps. Additionally, Juma's car, which was automatic, had not rammed into any stationary objects, such as the lamppost near the scene, to come to a halt. It merely scraped the lamppost, as evidenced by some of the navy blue car paint from Juma's Mercedes left on the lamppost. This suggests the car had slowly veered from the road and come to a halt. There were also no skid marks on the road. Going by the DCI's theory, if Juma had been ambushed and shot at while driving at approximately 60 kilometers per hour or 80 kilometers per hour, he would have veered off the road, leaving skid marks and possibly hitting the lamppost with high impact. Still on Juma's car, according to Dennis Onsarigo, when the police arrived at the scene, Juma's car engine had been switched off, raising the question, who switched off the engine? Given the extent of Juma's injuries, he would not have been able to switch off the engine before he died. Another piece of evidence that showed that the scene that Jacob Juma was found at was staged was the fact that the bullet patterns on the body of his car were inconsistent with the car being shot at while moving. The bullets appeared to have been randomly shot while the car was stationary, making it look like the car was ambushed and shot at. Finally, and most damningly, some of the tweets on Jacob Juma's account were deleted the night he was murdered, and the last seen status on Juma's WhatsApp was 10:05 p.m., the night he died. During this time, remember that Juma was already dead, and the police were processing the scene of the murder. So who had access to Juma's WhatsApp? It could be that the police at the scene were able to access his WhatsApp on his iPhone using his fingerprint. Alternatively, and this is what we're inclined to believe, it could have been his assassins were able to access his WhatsApp and perhaps even gain web access to it on a laptop before killing Jacob Juma. The police's cover-up of Jacob Juma's death would continue when instead of taking Jacob Juma's body straight to the mortuary, his body was transported in a police Land Cruiser to the current police station, and Jacob Juma's body was booked into the city mortuary at 1:57 a.m. by one Corporal Haemba. What the police were doing with Jacob Juma's body at the police station for 3 to 4 hours remains a mystery. 3 days after Jacob Juma was murdered, an autopsy was conducted at Lee Funeral Home, but the questions continued to pile up. His body was presented for the autopsy with a blood-soaked gauze. For context, a gauze is a thin woven fabric used to dress wounds. The gauze covered the bullet wounds on Jacob Juma's neck and on his right hand, just above his elbow. The police could not answer who placed the gauze and why they did it. One thing, however, is clear. Juma did not have the gauze when he was found dead in his car. Whoever placed the gauze did so either at the current police station or the city mortuary where the police took him after he was killed. Our hunch is that the person who placed the gauze on Jacob Juma's body, possibly at the current police station or the city mortuary, did so to prevent post-mortem bleeding after removing the bullets still lodged in Jacob Juma's body with the goal of getting rid of evidence. The evident political assassination of Jacob Juma was met with both international and national uproar, with many blaming the Uhuru government for Jacob Juma's death and spotlighting the numerous extrajudicial killings, including those of ICC witnesses that had been linked to Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy president, William Ruto. Jacob Juma was buried on Saturday, 14th May 2016, in his family home in Mugore village in Bungoma County. The burial was attended by top political leaders including Cyrus Jirongo, the man who introduced Jacob Juma to the world of government tenders when he was in his 20s. Cyrus Jirongo pointed fingers at William Ruto for Jacob Juma's assassination, and to show what Ruto was capable of, he shared a story of a day when he witnessed Ruto strangle a young man in cold blood.
Wakati kijana mmoja ambaye alikuwa kwa wale ambao walikuwa wametumwa alikuja akachapa mshale kwa gari yangu, George Captain alitoka mbio akapata huyo kijana, akamwangukia kwa miguu akashika. Sisi tulikuwa tunafikiri tumeshika mtu, lakini huyo kijana rafiki yangu ndio nikaelewa ana damu ya kuua. Alienda akageuza shingo yake akaua huyo kijana. Wale mlikuwa sabani, mnakumbuka yule aliua huyo kijana alikuwa deputy president. Lakini mnaelewa, nini mnaelewa, mtu akizoea kuwa watu, ataendelea kuua. Damu yake, damu ya wale ambao wamezikwa haitamwacha ndani. Lazima atembee kila siku auwe.
Beyond Jirongo's confession, certain burial rites, as per Jacob Juma's community's traditions, were performed to ensure that his killers would not rest. Juma was buried with a torch and a knife to hunt his killers. As Juma's burial was taking place at his family home in Bungoma County, back in Nairobi, a man who had worked for the Jacob Juma family for years managed to access his bedroom and steal his iPad and 2 phones before disappearing. Those close to Juma, including his family and friends, believe the man must have been paid by those involved in Juma's death to steal the devices. As expected in such a high-profile murder, especially of someone such as Jacob Juma, who was very active and popular on social media, there were a lot of rumors and lies about what happened to him. Most notably, in November of 2016, 5 months after Jacob Juma's death, Boniface Mwangi received an anonymous typed and printed letter. The letter, dated 18th November 2016, entitled Self-Confession, made some bold claims. The person who wrote this letter claimed to have been an assassin and a spy of high-profile politicians, and claimed to have been involved in the planning and execution of Jacob Juma's murder. He alleged that he had been recruited for the job to kill Jacob Juma by Farouk Kibet. In the letter, the said assassin also claimed to have recruited and paid Cheryl to kill Jacob Juma. The assassin was also asking Boniface Mwangi for money to give him the evidence he had against Ruto. Additionally, the assassin told Boniface Mwangi that he was also a target for assassination. The letter is very lengthy and we'll share a link for you to read it in the comments below. By reading the letter, it seemed like a well-written fiction story by someone with a wild imagination. One thing about confession letters, they always mention something that only the killer or killers and maybe the investigating officers would know. But this letter seems like a pottage of online rumors and publicly available information. And yes, the letter turned out to not be from a spy or an assassin, but a man looking for a few minutes of fame and some cash. One Douglas Nyakundi. Nyakundi was arrested and held by police for interrogation, and later arraigned in court on 1st December 2016. And he was charged with trying to extort money from Boniface Mwangi under false pretenses. Nyakundi, in his first sworn affidavit, claimed that his boss, a man by the name Rono, had given him the letter to send to Boniface Mwangi. But later, in a new affidavit, Nyakundi claimed it was Boniface Mwangi who had coached him about what to say. Unfortunately, there isn't any information in the public domain beyond this change of confession by Douglas Nyakundi and how the case moved forward in the courts, if at all. The question still lingers: who killed Jacob Juma? We theorize that it might have been the Special Service Unit, a rogue and exclusive unit trained to kill, formed within the DCI, that politicians used to kill innocent Kenyans. Some of the policemen who are part of this unit are currently being charged with the murder of 2 Indians and a taxi driver. The 2 Indians were part of William Ruto's digital campaign strategy during his 2022 campaigns. The same police unit is also suspected to have killed Chris Msando and ICC witnesses set to testify against William Ruto. The rogue unit was disbanded by Ruto in October of 2022 after he was elected as the 5th president of the Republic of Kenya. Another lingering question is who gave the orders for Jacob Juma to be killed? Knowing what we know now, that Farouk Kibet, who at the time was Ruto's PA and still is his PA, a man whom Jacob Juma linked to the NYS scandal, is currently under Ruto's presidency overseeing an elite squad of mercenaries, some rumored not to be even Kenyan, who are being used by Ruto's government to abduct Kenyans who push back on his government's poor governance. It's not hard to connect the dots and say, William Ruto, Farouk Kibet, and Uhuru Kenyatta have a case to answer as to who killed Jacob Juma. The third lingering question is how did they kill Jacob Juma? There are many theories out there as to how Jacob Juma got to Ngong Road, but we believe that it's highly likely Jacob Juma was not the person driving the car when he left the Nairobi CBD, or he had people in his car making him drive a certain direction. These people most likely got into Jacob Juma's car after Juma dropped Cheryl off at Trattoria restaurant. We are not saying that Cheryl is involved in Jacob Juma's assassination, but we are saying the assassins would have used that window when she alighted from the car to get into Juma's car. This could be the reason why the police did not follow up on the cameras showing Juma's movements in the Nairobi CBD, including him dropping Cheryl off at the Trattoria restaurant. Additionally, Jacob Juma knew his life was in danger, which made him extra cautious, and he used the same routes on roads. And these roads that Jacob Juma stuck to using always had traffic and cameras, and he used them so as to avoid an obvious ambush. The day Jacob Juma was murdered is the only day he changed his route home from Langata Road, which is the route he always took home, to Ngong Road, which is one of the few roads at the time that was yet to be covered by the high-powered CCTV cameras mounted on key roads and streets in Nairobi in a project launched by Uhuru in 2015. 8 years later, we still don't know what truly happened to Jacob Juma on the night that he was murdered. Before we log off, we are sure you are wondering what happened to the Erad maize supply case and the mining license dispute, which Jacob Juma was involved in. For the Erad maize supply case, Jacob Juma's co-directors, that is Sirisia MP John Waluke and Grace Wahongo, were trialed in the Milimani Anti-Corruption Court for fraud and illegal acquisition of millions of Kenyan shillings through a shady deal with the National Cereals and Produce Board NCPB. On 25th June 2020, they were found guilty of the charges and were sentenced to 67 years in jail each, with an option of paying a 1 billion Kenyan shillings fine. The two only spent about 3 months in jail before moving to the High Court to challenge the ruling, and they were released on bail as they awaited the outcome of their appeal. In November of 2022, the High Court upheld the sentencing by the Milimani Anti-Corruption Court, and Relentless, John Waluke, and Grace Wahongu moved to the Court of Appeal. And on Friday, 11th October 2024, 20 years after Enrad Supplies signed the contract with NCPB, the case came to an end when the Court of Appeal let John and Grace off the hook and overturned their sentencing, meaning the two are walking scot-free. For the mining license dispute case, which was being arbitrated by the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, ICSID, a ruling was made in 2018 that Jacob Juma's company, Kotek Mining Limited, and Sterling Capital, owned by Pacific Wildcat Resources Limited, were to pay the Kenyan government approximately $3.5 million USD. Kotek Limited and Sterling Capital Limited appealed this decision by the tribunal, and in 2021, the appeal was dismissed. So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the story of Jacob Juma. We extend our heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of Jacob Juma. May his soul continue to rest in eternal peace. Thank you for joining us today. If you appreciated this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to be notified when the next video is up. Until then, please take care, stay safe, and always trust your gut.